On our newscast tonight, in the 45th Security Consultative Meeting held in Seoul on Wednesday, South Korea and the U.S. formally endorsed a tailored deterrence strategy against increasing North Korean threats. Meanwhile, on the last day of the UN General Assembly in New York, a North Korean representative accuses Washington of stoking tensions on the Korean peninsula. After going through all the records, more than 7.5 million of them, the prosecution concludes that the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit transcript is nowhere to be found at the National Archives. But they did uncover evidence to suggest that files related to the summit were erased. Tong Yang Group, one of Korea's biggest conglomerates, filed for court receivership to avert bankruptcy early this week, while other conglomerates like Hanjin and Hyundai Group hold debt ratios of over 400%. Could this mark the beginning of a wave of corporate bankruptcies? Stay with us for these stories and more.
It is 5 a.m. in Washington, noon in Damascus, and 6 on a Thursday evening, or Wednesday evening rather, here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel Chen. Thank you for joining us. We begin on defense talks.
South Korea and the U.S. have formally endorsed a tailored deterrence strategy against increasing North Korean threats. Now, this came during their annual defense dialogue, which came to a close on this Wednesday.
However, there was no agreement on the pending transfer of wartime operational control from the U.S. to Korea, which is set for 2015. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Han Da-eun has our top story.
South Korean Defense Minister Kim Kwan-jin and U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel sat down for the 45th Security Consultative Meeting in Seoul on Wednesday, after which they adopted a joint declaration that contains 13 military agreements. Among them is the endorsement of a tailored deterrent strategy against North Korean nuclear and missile threats.
South Korea and the U.S. have completed a tailored deterrent strategy optimized to effectively address rising North Korean nuclear threats after its third nuclear test.
Under the strategy, the integration of the Korea-U.S. alliance will be strengthened to maximize the deterrent effect against North Korean nuclear threats sorted by scenario. And when signs of North Korean nuclear activity are detected, the combined forces will use all possible military capabilities available from the ground, sea, and air to launch countermeasures. The two defense chiefs also reaffirmed the need to work together for a comprehensive, interoperable missile defense system, which includes the kill chain and Korea air and missile defense system currently being developed by the Korean military. But there was no conclusion on the matter of the transfer of the wartime operational control from the U.S. to Korea set for 2015. Secretary Hagel said he takes the OPCON issues raised by the Korean military seriously, but added the U.S. will not make any decisions now.
We've had good discussions regarding the timing of OPCON transfer, and I look forward to continuing consultations on this issue in the weeks and the months ahead.
Minister Kim had asked Washington in May to delay the OPCON transfer in light of North Korea's nuclear threats. The two countries have agreed to immediately form a working group that'll regularly discuss and assess combat readiness of South Korea, which is the prime condition of the transition. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Now, over in New York on the last day of the UN General Assembly, a North Korean representative called for nuclear disarmament negotiations to begin as soon as possible. However, he made no mention of the long-stalled six-party denuclearization talks. Arirang News Foreign Affairs correspondent Hwang Sang-hee has the details.
Speaking at the UN General Assembly on Monday, North Korean Vice Foreign Minister Park Ki-ryun said that creating a nuclear-free world was the unanimous demand of the international community. With that, Park suggested a swift commencement of nuclear disarmament talks.
Nuclear disarmament negotiations should begin without further delay to work on binding international legal documents that stipulate unconditional security assurances for the prohibition and disuse of nuclear weapons.
The comments echo North Korea's basic stance that it is already a nuclear-armed state. Although Park stressed his country's commitment to end mounting tensions through dialogue, there was no mention of a possible resumption of the six-party denuclearization talks. The multilateral disarmament for aid dialogue between the two Koreas, the United States, China, Japan, and Russia have been stalled since 2008. The North Korean official also accused Washington of stoking decades of tensions on the Korean peninsula.
Because North Korea holds a different ideology and system from itself, the United States designated our country as its enemy from day one, refusing to recognize our sovereignty and imposing all sorts of sanctions, pressures, and military threats for more than half a century.
Park's speech comes amid fresh tensions on the Korean peninsula after weeks of seemingly amicable inter-Korean relations. In response to recent signs that North Korea may be expanding its nuclear program, South Korea unveiled at a parade on Tuesday a new missile capable of pinpoint strikes across the border. The parade was attended by U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, once again reaffirming Seoul and Washington's strong alliance. The North Korean official said the only way to secure peace and stability on the Korean peninsula is for Washington to step aside. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Back here in this country, as far as the nation's prosecution is concerned, the search at the National Archives for the missing 2007 Inter-Korean Summit transcript is over. After searching high and low, prosecutors said Wednesday that the transcript is not there and suggested the files related to the Inter-Korean Summit were erased. Here's our political correspondent Kim Hyun-ji with this report.
The Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office announced Wednesday that the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit transcript and tape recordings are not at the National Archives, saying that they were never transferred or stored there. Prosecutors said the conclusion was reached after going through all records, more than 7.5 million of them, that had been transferred from the Nomuhyun government to the state archives. Prosecutors said the original transcript had been uploaded in an electronic archive system at the presidential office called EG1 soon after the 2007 Inter-Korean Summit, but it was subsequently erased from the system. Prosecutors say they found traces of the erasure from a duplicate of the EG1 that President No took with him to Ponga village after his term ended. Prosecutors added that the summit minutes had not been tagged for transfer to the state archives and that the original transcript was deleted. But prosecutors say they have successfully recovered the deleted file. Prosecutors also found an edited version of the transcript saved in the duplicate of the EG1, which they say is virtually identical to the copy the National Intelligence Service has. Starting next week, prosecutors plan to summon President No's staff who stored and transferred the presidential records to the National Archives. An official at the presidential office said Wednesday that the missing presidential record is a grave event that should have never taken place. The ruling Saenuri Party demanded former presidential office staff for President No and the main opposition Democratic Party apologize for destroying the summit transcript and take responsibility. Saying that it will keep an eye on how the probe unfolds, the Democratic Party stressed that the prosecution should also reveal how the ruling party got its hands on the transcript and used it before the December presidential election. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's leading conglomerates have dominated the domestic economy for decades, but in recent years, many of them have been struggling under the weight of increasing debt and sluggish earnings. And with the economic outlook at home and abroad remaining bleak, it doesn't look like it will be easy for the companies to reduce their debt burdens anytime soon. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
New fears of a wave of corporate bankruptcies were spurred when Tong Yang Group, one of Korea's biggest conglomerates, filed for court receivership to avert bankruptcy early this week. Leading up to the filing, the group's debt ratio had increased more than eightfold to 1,231% last year from 5 years ago, a prime indicator of its declining financial health. The story is similar for other local conglomerates like Hanjin and Hyundai Group, both of which have debt ratios of over 400%.
It's no surprise then that the total amount of debt held by the nation's top 30 conglomerates nearly doubled to about 600 trillion won, or roughly 550 billion US dollars in just 5 years.
It's easy to think that Korean conglomerates are doing well, as the earnings of some major companies like Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motor are high. But with the exception of those two, the earnings of many of the rest of the conglomerates are slowing down.
In prosperous times, it could work for conglomerates to take on billions of dollars of debt to expand, but the current economic conditions are instead leading them to overestimate their capacity, which has in turn brought them huge losses.
It's hard to see any development among the conglomerates with this kind of management paradigm. The conglomerates will have to take some innovative steps to maintain their financial health.
With so many conglomerates facing mounting debt, experts now warn about the problems it could cause for the economy as a whole. Hanjin, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye invited the leaders of small and mid-sized companies to the presidential office of Cheongwade on Wednesday and gave them a chance to convey the hardships they are facing. During a luncheon with the businessmen, President Park emphasized that Korea could strengthen its global competitiveness by creating what she called a new economic ecosystem that boosts the competitiveness of small and mid-sized enterprises, or SMEs. She said that promoting the growth of these small enterprises is important in realizing our administration's goal of a 70% employment rate. The president called on those companies to actively develop new technologies and ideas, as creativity and innovation have become key factors in securing an upper hand in the current economic environment. Some bad news for Koreans. The cost of a cab ride is about to get a little pricier here in the nation's busiest city. The Seoul metropolitan government said Wednesday that it was raising the basic taxi fare in the capital to 3,000 won, or roughly $2.79, starting October 12th. That's a 25% increase from the current $2.20 and represents the first rate hike in 4 years. Along with the basic fare change, passengers riding in and out of Seoul to surrounding cities will be charged extra fees.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with heroes and experts to help you understand the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best, with Moon Gun-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Now shifting gears to the economy, Korean import prices rose by 2 points. Moving on to the latest on the first U.S. government shutdown in 17 years. President Barack Obama has accused his Republican opponents of holding the entire U.S. economy hostage in the row over his health care reforms. With Congress still in deadlock, core parts of Obamacare took effect on Tuesday, but hundreds of thousands of furloughed federal workers had to go home out of work. Our UDN has the latest.
The first partial government shutdown in 17 years forced hundreds of thousands of federal workers to go home Tuesday, out of work and out of luck.
You really want to know what I think of Congress right now? Honestly, I think they need to get their act together, stop acting like children and pass the budget.
The stalemate in Congress failed to stop the closure of federal agencies and government services across the country on Tuesday. The Democrat-led Senate had, for the fourth time, thrown out a spending plan by the Republican-led House of Representatives that aims to undermine President Obama's health care plan.
Republicans in the House of Representatives refused to fund the government unless we defunded or dismantled the Affordable Care Act. They've shut down the government over an ideological crusade to deny affordable health insurance to millions of Americans.
He also urged the Republicans to raise the $16.7 trillion debt ceiling that the government expects to hit on October 17th, saying a failure to do so would be devastating to the U.S. economy. A week-long government shutdown for now could cut the country's economic growth by 1/3 of a percentage point, according to Goldman Sachs. While Republicans and Democrats remain at loggerheads over the budget bill, core parts of Obamacare went into effect Tuesday. The online health insurance marketplaces met with higher than expected demand on their first day live. Around 3 million people have visited the federal website since midnight, according to the Department of Health and Human Services. The Obama administration hopes to have 7 million people signed up during the first year, and eventually at least half of the nearly 50 million, or 15% of Americans, who don't have health insurance. The healthcare plans are slated to begin next year. Yurian, Arirang News.
Moving on to some positive developments in other parts of our world, the mission to dismantle Syria's stockpile of chemical weapons has begun with the arrival of international disarmament experts in Damascus. Their first priority will be to figure out how to destroy the equipment and facilities that allowed Syria to produce the weapons in the first place. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
A team of international inspectors arrived in the Syrian capital Tuesday to start work on verifying and eliminating the country's stockpile of chemical weapons. The group of 20 from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons will first meet with Syrian officials, and then they'll start the process of figuring out how to reach the weapons and carry out their mission. The Syrian government says it has offered to cooperate with the team.
The government has been very cooperative. It is the party that volunteered joining the Organization for Non-Proliferation of Chemical Weapons.
The international community estimates that Syria has about 1,000 tons of chemical weapons in its arsenal. The initial group of inspectors who are working under a UN Security Council resolution will have until the middle of next year to clear away Syria's chemical weapons stockpile. A second group of inspectors is expected to arrive in Syria in the coming weeks to aid the mission. But their first task is to destroy the equipment and facilities used to produce chemical weapons, and they've set a deadline of November 1st. It's a task that could prove extremely difficult, as almost half of the sites declared by the government are in combat areas. The operation comes after a deadly chemical attack on the outskirts of Damascus on August 21st that killed hundreds of people. The U.S. and the other nations hold the Syrian government responsible. But Damascus blames the rebels, and Syria's foreign minister claimed on Monday that a number of regional and well-known Western countries are supplying the rebels with chemical weapons. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, the rest of the world may observe the International Day of Older Persons on October 1st every year, but here in Korea, we commemorate the day today on October 2nd. The day is spent acknowledging the contributions that older people make to society and raising awareness about issues that affect the elderly.
For more about this special day, we have Kim Ji-yeon joining us live in the News Center. Ji-yeon, could you tell us a little bit more about the International Day of Older Persons and explain to us how Koreans are celebrating it?
Well, Daniel, Kon-young, the day was designated by the United Nations in 1990 in order to raise awareness about issues concerning the aging population, which in Korea is growing at a very rapid pace. The day is actually celebrated on October 1st in many parts of the world, but because that day is Armed Forces Day here in Korea, the International Day of Older Persons is observed one day later on October 2nd. It is an important day because the rapid growth of the aging population is such a pressing concern here in Korea and for countries around the world. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon warned that by the year 2050, the number of older persons will be twice the number of children in developed countries, and the number of older persons in developing countries is expected to double, and in turn, this trend is expected to have profound effects on countries and individuals. In Korea, there was a variety of events around the nation to celebrate the Day of Older Persons, including providing a grand feast for the elderly people living in the community. But a lot of Koreans have their own ways of commemorating the day, and I was lucky to be able to follow two people who have dedicated their lives to helping the elderly who are volunteering at a local senior center. Take a look. Hong Moon-jae and Ko Myung-soon are on their way to check in on an elderly lady they think is in her 70s, identified only by her surname Im. Im suffers from memory loss as a result of Alzheimer's disease, one of the most common type of dementia, and lives alone. Hong and Go check in on her at least once a week to make sure she's eating and taking care of her health, but they'll go more often if there's a problem. Once they found Lim with a lump on her head and tried to get her some medical care. Another time they found her with a pot of weak broth, and when they asked about it, they discovered she'd forgotten how to make dinner, so they did the cooking for her. Hong, who is 68 years old, and Ko, who is 56, have been volunteering together at the Kangdong Center for Dementia for 3 years.
I always try to think about how I can better treat her mind and heart. I really feel happy when I do this, but it's really hard to explain my feelings in words, to fully convey what I feel.
The number of people with dementia has risen steadily in Korea in recent years. According to the Ministry of Health and Welfare, the country's elderly population, defined as those who are 65 and over, had risen more than 17% over the past 4 years through the end of 2012, while the number of elderly people with dementia had risen around 27% in the same period. The ministry estimated that around 1 in 10 Koreans has dementia and predicted the number would expand to 1 million in 2024. To address the situation, the city of Seoul started building centers for senior citizens in 2008, dedicated to preventing dementia among the elderly. There are centers in almost every district in the city of Seoul, and they offer programs tailored to the needs of the people in each community.
Now, Jian, tell us more about these centers. Are they similar to nursing homes for patients with advanced dementia? I mean, what kinds of services do they provide?
These centers are quite different from nursing homes, Konya. While nursing homes care for patients that already have dementia, these centers focus on easing the symptoms for those who have demonstrated early signs of the condition. The centers offer free checkups for anyone over the age of 60 and organize social gatherings to help keep people active. People who show early signs of dementia are eligible for a free consultation with a counselor who can give them some options for their next steps forward.
Okay, Jian, so what are some of the ways to prevent dementia?
Well, local experts have suggested lifestyle changes for people of all ages that can help reduce the risk of getting dementia. Dr. Han So-hee of Konkuk University Hospital emphasized the importance of preventing dementia at a very early stage. Take a look.
Compared to other parts of our body, like the stomach, the brain, once it's damaged, cannot recover as quickly. So it's important to prevent or mitigate symptoms of dementia before or at the early stages of memory loss.
As the teenage years are a crucial time for the development of brain cells, experts say teens should be exposed to a variety of experiences, such as learning how to play an instrument or taking trips to new places. Those in their 20s should avoid heavy consumption of alcohol, which could accelerate damage to these cells. And depending on the person's weight and the volume of alcohol in a drink, that's less than 3 cups of soju a day or 75 milliliters of alcohol. For those in their 30s and 40s, experts recommend exercising for at least 1 hour 3 times a week. Those in their 50s and 60s are advised to have a brain scan at least once every 5 years.
Right, preventing it is, I guess, more important than curing it. So that was our Kim Ji-yeon reporting live about how International Day of Older Persons is being observed right here in Korea.
Time for weather, which means we turn to our Kim Bo-young standing by at the Weather Center. Hello, Bo-young. Light rain fell here and there throughout the nation today.
Yes, it did sprinkle in the morning, but the rain has now lifted.
Right, Pookyung, many of our viewers might be wondering how the weather is looking tomorrow, which of course is Korea's National Foundation Day.
Well, Kanyang, it looks like Mother Nature is going to cooperate because tomorrow is looking absolutely bright and sunny, which is perfect for those of you who have a day off. But after today's rain, temperatures should drop to the low teens in most parts of the country tomorrow morning. So please be sure to grab a thick cardigan or jacket before you head out. Other than that, the average daytime high around the nation should hit 25 degrees with abundant sunshine. So it should be a perfect one for you to enjoy outdoor activities with your friend and family. Now, taking a closer look at tomorrow's forecast, Seoul should make it to 21 degrees. Meanwhile, cities down south should hit the mid-20s. Moving on to other regions. Well, it looks like the morning temperature in Daejeon should drop to 8 degrees before hitting 22 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, Dokdo and Mangkumgang should peak at 20 and 13 degrees respectively. Well, that's all I have for you this hour, but join me for another update after 8.
Thank you for that, Pookyung. And that's all from us for this hour. Thank you for watching. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Moon Ganyang. Thank you, as always, for being here with us. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you right back here same time tomorrow. Good night.